The etiology and epidemiology of non-communicable diseases such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases, which include coronary and ischemic heart diseases, myocardial infarction, heart failure, and stroke, have been found to largely correlate to poor dietary choices. The dietary approaches to stop hypertension, also known as the DASH diet, and the Mediterranean diet are both quite similar, both largely promoting high intakes of vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, as well as the consumption of legumes, nuts, fish, and poultry, and attempts to reduce consumption of red meat and meat products, sweets, and sugar-containing beverages. Although the two diets have minor differences in guidelines surrounding dairy, fats and oils, eggs, and alcohol, the overall aim of each diet is to limit the consumption of processed foods, thereby reducing overall fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium intakes. As diet has been identified to be a key modifiable risk factor for both the prevention and risk reduction for heart disease, it is hypothesized that diets more consistent with the DASH and Mediterranean diets provide protective cardiovascular effects. As there are slight differences between the two dietary patterns, the aim of this project is to investigate if, as well as how, both the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet are efficient dietary interventions for reducing heart and cardiovascular disease risk factors through the use of a systematic review. Available research examining associations between the DASH diet and heart disease and the Mediterranean diet and heart disease have been extracted after searching available databases. As there is limited research relating to clinical biomarkers or pertaining to only heart disease as a clinical outcome, studies in the systematic review include those reporting on cardiovascular disease incidence and mortality. The limited availability of particular studies investigating specific heart disease risk factors and dietary interventions could possibly be considered to be a limitation for this current review. Inclusion criteria also consisted of studies with participants with no baseline illness, in particular, no cardiovascular disease of any time at the time of enrollment. Comparison to another diet or diet variations, measurements of the incidence of cardiovascular events, which include coronary and ischemic heart diseases, myocardial infarction, and stroke. The types of studies include randomized control trials, prospective cohorts, and systemic reviews and meta-analysis. A summary of findings has been created in order to capture the key information and findings related to the studies included in the systematic review. The DASH diet was originally trialled in 1997, with results demonstrating the DASH diet's effect on lowering blood pressure. Since then, a systemic review published in 2013 exploring the DASH diet's effect on fatal and non-fatal cardiovascular disease incidence demonstrated that the dietary pattern could reduce the risk of developing cardiovascular diseases by 20%, coronary heart disease by 21%, heart failure by 29%, and stroke by 19%. In comparison, the Mediterranean diet appears to have an abundance of evidence demonstrating beneficial effects for overall good health and well-being. A 2017 systematic review of the Mediterranean diet showed a favorable protective role on cardiovascular disease, with a decreased risk of around 20 to 25% for those with higher adherence to the diet. In another study, over 7,000 participants considered to be at a high risk of cardiovascular disease were randomized to a Mediterranean diet, either supplemented with extra virgin olive oil or nuts, or to a controlled diet which was low in fat. After a median 4.8-year follow-up period, it was found that those on either of the Mediterranean diets had a relative risk reduction of approximately 30%. Both the DASH and Mediterranean diets do appear to provide protective effects against cardiovascular diseases, with higher adherence to each diet being associated with increased risk reduction. However, what has been observed from this research is that each study appears to use varying tools to measure adherence to the DASH diet and Mediterranean diet. There is also discrepancies between what food components and servings make up each of the diets, which could be considered a limitation. However, from further analysis of the individual studies included, this information may become more apparent, and further findings and conclusions may be drawn, which could be beneficial for practical applications of the diets in both research and clinical settings.